Hello friends! So, the other day, I was presented with one of these puzzles, where there were 5 words, rag, apron, map, mop, and napkin, and so the puzzle was basically to find the odd one out. You know, that one word that is different from all the others. Well, so my first instinct was that most of those words, in fact, 4 out of 5, described items that could probably be found in the average kitchen or dining room, and that were meant to keep those places clean. And in my case, I keep those 4 items very close at hand, every time I cook and eat, especially the napkin and the apron, because, you know, accidents happen, at least they do to me, when I'm around food. So yeah, looking at it that way, the only item that's different is the map, which, in my case at least, has no real use in the kitchen. I know my way around it pretty well, and so this map that I've drawn here is really just for illustrative purposes, because, well, I kind of know the layout of my kitchen's dessert corner, like the back of my hand. It's admittedly where I spend most of my time on any given day. Anyway, as I thought more about those 5 words, I remembered that, as I recently learned, the word map is actually related to many of those words through etymology. So, apparently, the word map comes from the surface that they were originally written on. In the early years of the Roman Empire, for example, the works of the educator Quintilian mention the word mappa, the ancestor of the word map. According to Quintilian, this word mappa was likely itself derived from the Phoenician word mappa, which denoted a fine cloth. So, according to this theory, our word map is a distant descendant of Semitic, and therefore related to the modern Hebrew word mapa, which means both map and tablecloth. A map and a tablecloth, both conveyed with one word. Interesting. Now, in Quintilian's time, mappa still referred to a fine linen cloth, like its ancestor, but it was specifically used similarly to a tablecloth, or large napkin, and guests would often bring them and use them at the dinner table to wrap items of food that they wished to take away with them. So basically, a Roman-era doggy bag. So over time, people realized that this fine cloth made a nice, durable surface for writing and also for drawing. So people began to draw all sorts of things on them, including, well, maps. And during the Middle Ages, they began to draw elaborate world maps, like the one shown here. These were known appropriately as Mappa Mundi, or literally, cloth of the world. Now, to be clear, the late 13th century map shown here, from Hereford, is actually produced on vellum, which is animal skin, but it is believed that earlier versions of this map, and other ones similar to it produced during the Middle Ages, were made of cloth. Anyway, over time, the Latin phrase was adapted into other languages, for example the Old French mapa monde, and the Middle English mappa monde, which still denoted those elaborate cloth maps. And then finally, the second element, mundi, was dropped, leaving just mappa, which of course we can recognize as the direct ancestor of our word map. So yes, maps were originally drawn on pieces of fine cloth, and speaking of cloth, well, the original mop was also made out of cloth, as are napkins, and thus, just like map, these 2 words also descend from the same Latin word mappa. Oh, and then there's apron. In French, you have the word nappe, or tablecloth, and then also the word napperon, or small tablecloth, also known as a placemat, and so from napperon, through a process called rebracketing in etymology, a napperon became an apron. So, when you wear an apron, you're basically wearing a small tablecloth. Wow, that's an interesting way to look at it. Now, back to our question. Which of these words is not like the others? Well, if we're thinking etymologically, which, for better or for worse, is usually the case with me, well then the answer is definitely rag, which is in a family of its own, and unlike mop, map, apron, and napkin, which all originally had a finely smooth and gentle surface, a rag is definitely, and quite literally, not cut from the same cloth. Thanks for watching.